Hello everyone, National Master Sean Lei here, and today we have a pretty exciting Blitz game that I played against a FIDE Master on chess.com. As you guys can see, it's a 3-minute game. Now, spoiler alert, the game ended in a questionable result because my opponent did disconnect, and so I was able to win by default. But I just wanted to show this game because it's a very informative and very instructional game on how to play the white Philidor or the normal Philidor if your opponent decides to play an early d5 and c5, as you guys can see in this position over here. Now, let's just go through the early moves. Again, the Philidor, if you want to play it on the white side, you can begin with knight f3 or d3, doesn't really matter. d3, d5, knight f3, c5. And this is kind of the annoying variation because you can't really play a normal Philidor because in a normal Philidor, when you play e4, your opponent can't play d4 because it creates a big weakness. But with a pawn on c5, that's not so much the case. So you have to kind of play a different opening. You can't really play the normal Philidor that I've taught you guys in the past, and instead you gotta play a little bit more of a King's Indian attack. And I don't know if you guys know about the King's Indian attack, but it's one of the most complicated openings in the world. But today I'm going to give you guys a little bit some tips to help you guys learn the opening. So I play knight bd2, again nothing too abnormal. My opponent plays knight c6, I play e4, and he plays d4. And here's where you can play a variation where you play c3, get rid of this pawn, or you don't have to. It's really up to personal preference. I like to play c3, open things up a little bit on the queen side, and then play this g3 structure. Now, you might think to yourself, g3 looks a little bit weird, right? I mean, why are you playing g3 to put the bishop on g2 where the bishop's not doing anything? But the bishop on g2, yes, it's not a very useful piece, but it's not going to be very useful on e2 either. But the idea of g3 is so you can play pawn to f4. Now, pawn to f4 is very strong because if they take you, you take back, and you get this huge center. And this huge center is very good for, your chess. And if he doesn't take, well, you're going to see what the plan in this position is. The plan is very, very, very simple. We're going to be attacking the king's side. We're going to be moving our pawns up all the way and trying to blow up our opponent's king. Now, bishop g2 is played, f6, castle, bishop d6, and now we play a very non-beginner friendly move, I would say. But if you guys can understand these type of moves, you guys are already pretty good at chess, to be honest. And that's this move, knight e1. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Sean, can't we just move our knight and develop our bishop? But the idea is these two pieces don't really need any development. They're kind of good the way they are. We only need to move them when you need to move them, right? And so knight e1, what it does, it helps propel our plan to go for this kingside attack, f4, f5, g4, g5, h4, h5, and be extremely annoying to our opponents. So f4 comes in, f5 comes in, g4 comes in, and as you guys can see, even though black is fully developed, our attack is coming extremely quickly. And one tip I have for you guys, which is extremely important if you guys want to improve past a certain level in chess, it's you don't just develop your pieces for fun, all right? You develop your pieces for a purpose, because imagine, all right, imagine you're playing a game of chess, your pieces are cool looking, but they're not doing anything coherent. If they're not doing anything together, well, they're not really doing anything at all, right? And so after g4, our opponent plays b5, he's doing a queenside attack, makes a lot of sense. I attack kingside, you attack queenside. This is a little bit of common sense. I play h4, rook c8. Now, of course, these moves are probably not the most accurate, both me and my opponent, because we're playing extremely quickly. As you guys can see, up until this point, I spent 13 seconds on this entire game. But for me, this is all muscle memory, these type of moves. And what's important is the concept themselves, more so than the actual moves that are played. If you just play these normal moves, at the lower levels, you'll do extremely fine. It's only when you get to the higher levels do things get a little bit more sketchy. So, again, ideas more important than the moves themselves. I play g5. Obviously, my opponent cannot capture, otherwise his king side is looking very boomed. My opponent plays queen e5. I play queen g4, threatening a little bit of a trick. Pawn takes here. he cannot capture back because there's a pin here. And then I threaten mate and his knight, so my opponent will lose. Now, obviously, he's a pretty good player. He sees this, so he plays king h8, and I decide to play knight f3, open up this bishop over here for potential use, as well as allowing my knight to come here in the future. My opponent plays knight b5, I decide to pin, and my opponent plays queen e4. And here I make a mistake, and I know it's a mistake, but I played it anyways, which is not good. So I don't recommend you guys play moves like b3. My recommendation is whenever you do an opposite side attack like this, just leave these pawns to hang. Don't waste time defending them or protecting them or moving them, because time spent here can be time spent over here instead. And you can do that. Every move you spend here, if you can get your plan to be faster than your opponent, well, my plan is to checkmate my opponent's king. Well, it doesn't matter if he wins my pawns here because I win the game over there, right? And so after queen a4, this b3 move, not very good, creates weaknesses in the position, doesn't really do much. I play h5, and my opponent takes on g5, and I take back with my knight. And this is where things get a little bit wonky, and it's where I began playing not so good moves. So today, unlike last time, we're going to have 2 questions of the day. Alright? And for these 2 questions, I want to see if you guys are able to spot moves that I was not able to find myself, nor my opponent, I assume. And big reason for that is because we didn't have much time on the clock. This was a blitz game, so again, accuracy of moves is very debatable. But there is a very cool tactic that shows up over here after knight g8. And if I found this, I would have beaten my FIDE master opponent quite convincingly. So I did not find it. But I want you guys to tell me what you guys think is the best move in this position. How do you win against a FIDE master using an extremely nice looking tactic? So I'm going to give yourself as long as you want, preferably not too much time. But if you guys need a hint, I'm going to give a hint in 2 seconds. So pause the video if you don't want to hear the hints and think for yourself. But my hint is there is some silly shenanigans that can be happening over here with this queen on g4, able to take on c8, and it's a little suspicious on my opponent's part. Alright, so I'm going to tell the answer now. Let's see if you guys were able to find the answer that I was not able to. So the answer is pawn to f6. And pawn to f6 has a very simple idea. I'm going to take on g7, open up your king, and I get some discovered attacks against your king and probably some checkmates. Or if you do take me, well, the issue is for my opponent, this rook is what you call an overworked piece. Alright? And if knight takes here, our opponent is a little bit doomed because he loses his rook on c8 because that rook on f8 was doing too many jobs. Now, if you guys were able to do that, let me know in the comment section below. See if you could have been a FIDE master. Unlike me, the way I beat him, not so, well, friendly, let's say that. And so, so I was not able to find that. And so instead, I just played rook f3. My idea was very simple. I was going to do some really silly sacrifices like knight takes f7, maybe a queen over here idea with rook h3. It's slow. And as you guys know, I am a very positional chess player. So I decided to go for this maneuver while, you know, my tactics are very low level, especially for someone who's a master level player. It's a little bit debatable, my tactical skills. I probably need to do some more tactics trainer. But anyways, my opponent plays knight c2, which ends up being a pretty bad move as well, for the exact same reason. f6 is still extremely strong, but I decide to just play rook c1 because I wanted to do some silly tricks, like if you take here, I can take there, and this rook again is overworked. So again, I'm doing it a little bit different, but the engine suggested move f6 is a lot better because you open up your opponent's position as well, which is exactly what you want to do in these type of positions. Now, my opponent blunders, he takes on e1. If he plays knight to e3, he's in a much better position due to the fact that, well, my rook is hanging here, as well as my queen. So I can't really defend them both. If I decide to capture on e3, well, the issue is, again, he can capture on c1. He will go up an entire piece, and I'll be very sad. But luckily for me, he just takes there. I take on c8. My plan has worked. He takes my rook on f3. I take back with a bishop, and his rook is stuck because it can't take here. Otherwise, it's a smothered mate. That's would be a pretty nice ending, to be honest, but my opponent is unfortunately a good player. So he plays knight to h6. Now, knight to h6 is again a questionable move according to the engine. Now, obviously, I was not able to find it in the game because this variation that follows is a little bit complex. But the idea here is that I'm able to take this bishop on f7. My opponent cannot take with a rook because it is pinned. And when he takes back with a knight, again, an h6 move, probably f6 works as well, but h6 kind of just demolishes our opponent here because after knight takes or pawn takes doesn't really matter. Can you guys see the winning combination here that gets you a completely crushing position? Again, this will be the second medal question of the day. This one's a little bit more complex, I would say, because it involves a pretty quiet looking move, a move that's not a check, a move that's not a capture, which means it can be a little bit more difficult, which is why I didn't find it as well. But let's see if you guys can find it, alright? So, alright, I'm going to assume you guys paused the video. If you didn't, well, you're about to get spoiled. Well, the idea is you can take this bit knight on h6, and when he captures back, f6 dooms our opponent. Because even though our rook is hanging, well, I guess our queen is defending it now, but the bigger issue is that we have a mate in one that is impossible to stop. You might say, Sean, easy. Rook g8, what are you talking about? But the problem with rook g8, and hopefully you guys saw this, is this is a very cool looking checkmate because it looks like the queen is pinned, but that's not how pins work because his rook is actually pinned to his king. So his rook cannot capture my queen, and even though my queen is pinned to the king, it's checkmate because it's defended by the pawn. So this would have been a very cool ending to the game if I had found it, but that's not what happened. Instead, Sean, me, messed up. I just decided to take there. I decide to move my queen back to g3. He attacks my bishop, and I get into this pretty bad position in which my opponent at this point ran out of time. I don't know if he disconnected or he forgot he was playing a chess game, which, to be honest, playing against me can be like that sometimes. My opponent lost on time here, and I'm completely lost here because my attack has kind of gone nowhere. And yes, I do have chances with ideas, the same ideas as before, but it'll take a long time I don't have because my opponent will probably promote in that time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson and enjoying this game I played. I think it's pretty instructional because it teaches you guys the main ideas of what to do if your opponent plays this c5 or early c4 idea if he's playing white, and this King's Indian setup. It's not too complicated in terms of the idea. You just pawn storm your opponent with this maneuver, but it gets very complex when it comes to actually finding the tactics because, as I told you guys, both my opponent here, who's a much stronger player than me in real life, him and I both messed up the tactics because there's so very many. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video.